Good morning. So I'm going to go over a brief timeline of the Rhoden murders and the beginning investigation of the Wagner family up to about like 2018, which is when they were arrested. And then everything after that has become a little quieter leading up to the trials. And then there was COVID and everything else. But up until 2021, obviously, when Jake and Angela both pled guilty. So for this, I'm using a couple different podcasts that are really good. If you want more information, you can totally go listen to those. They have interviews and stuff. The Pike County Massacre is an iHeartRadio podcast. It's on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. It has like 3 seasons. It's really good. I'm sorry the phone's shaking. I had an energy drink and no breakfast. And there's another one that is from a Cincinnati native. His name is escaping me right now, but it's called The Pink Moon Murders. It's not quite as produced, but I actually found out some things in that podcast that I hadn't heard before then. So let's get started. So to start at the beginning where it all starts, on April 22nd, 2016, there were 8 bodies discovered in 4 locations on Union Hill Road and Union Road, which turns off of Union Hill Road, I believe, in western Piketon Ohio on the Adams County border. This is in southern Ohio down on the river near Kentucky. Bobby Jo Manley, the sister of Dana Rhoden, discovered the bodies, as we said, called 911. They came out, discovered the bodies. Over a series of press conferences and everything the next day or two, then Sheriff Charlie Reeder was in over his head immediately and brought in Ohio's BCI and then Attorney General Mike DeWine, who is now the governor. They announced that they had found some marijuana grow operations and potentially some chicken fighting. And a few days later, they released some autopsy results about how many times people were shot. Somebody was shot 9 times, somebody was shot 5 times. Most of them were shot 1 time. Then they started the funeral services. They had the funerals for the Rhodens. I believe they buried 5 of the 6 together. Dana, Chris Sr., and their 3 children. Hannah Gilly was buried with her family. And Chris's cousin, Gary Rhoden, who was visiting, was taken back to Kentucky where he was buried. They also, during the funerals, began towing vehicles and later actually towed the mobile homes out of the area and took them to a storage facility. And there was some drama over whether the storage facility was secure or not. And there was a big fight on the internet between the sheriff and a reporter from, I think, Cincinnati.com. Go to part 2 and we'll go over some more. I found this picture online. This is the Rhoden compound. I believe this is the day of the murders. I believe you can see some of the investigative vehicles sitting out on the road. This is where 4 of the bodies were found. I believe, can't get my finger to show up. I believe that on this side right here is Frankie and Hannah Hazel Gilly's trailer. And I believe over here is where Chris Sr. and Gary were murdered and found, and that would explain a little more how close they were and when Bobby Jo ran next door to check on Frankie and get help from him, why they were so close together and why they were found. So really not a lot happens other than questioning of a lot of suspects and interviews pretty regularly at the beginning from the then sheriff and the then attorney general about what was going on until May of 2017. So a full year later, they do a search warrant execution on the grounds of a 71-acre Peoples, Ohio farm that is owned by Jake's grandmother. It's called the Flying W Farm. They breed many horses, I think. Her name is Frederica Wagner, which will come up later. In some of the podcasts, they talk about this being a really esteemed family in the county and her being this, matriarch that's like this church-going woman. And I have never met a single person that didn't think they were complete pieces of shit. So, and I had never heard of them prior to this, and I'd lived up there for a couple of years. So, I don't know how prolific they were, but whatever. They also did a second search warrant of some Wagner properties on the same day. I'm sorry, that farm had been sold in March to someone new, and the jurors did go see this site. they were talking about improvements that were made when they were talking about the site visits by the current owners, not the Wagners themselves. So they were living somewhere else, but this was the previous one. So the next big thing is that in the summer of 2017, so a year later, the Wagners up and moved to Alaska. Kenai, I'm probably saying that wrong, Alaska, Kenai. And at some point, so it was the whole little Wagner group, the father, the wife, the two sons. I believe at this point, George had custody of his child with him and Tabitha. I'm not 100% sure on that. And I don't know if Tabitha was still with them at that point. But I do know at some point, Jake got remarried. Yes, Jake, Mr. I'm going to kill my entire ex-girlfriend's family because she doesn't love me back, married another girl within a year. I don't know at what point they came back from Alaska and at what point they got a divorce, but her name was Beth, I believe, and she's not there. So like I said, at some point they came back from Alaska, and the ex-wife of Jake, her name is Beth, I believe, that I found from like groups on Facebook and stuff, is apparently in witness protection, which honestly is probably a good place for her. So on November 13th of 2018, 6 members of the Wagner family were arrested in different locations. Jake and George were pulled over and arrested, I believe, out of the semi-truck that they were driving. Their mother, Angela, was at home in South Webster, which is where they moved to when they came back from Alaska, which is in Scioto County, one county south. That's where I live now, and that's where I grew up. And then their father, Billy Wagner, was arrested pulling a horse trailer down near Lexington, Kentucky. Also arrested was Frederica Wagner, the grandmother, the mother of Billy Wagner, and Rita Newcomb, who is Angela Wagner's mother. They were both arrested with obstructing justice and perjury charges. And I believe Rita Newcomb was also charged with forgery. All 4 of the Wagners obviously pled not guilty. And I also believe that Jake caught some kind of statutory rape. I don't think that's a charge anymore. Or something like that for impregnating Hannah Rhoden at 15 when he was 20. Which is just a whole other video that I could go on for 3 minutes talking about how highly inappropriate that is. Ultimately, they did dismiss the charges against Frederica Wagner. I feel like they're going to refile those depending on how these trials go. I feel like that's the one they had the least evidence for. But Rita Newcomb, Angela Wagner's mother, she pled guilty a long time ago for forging signatures on custody documents before Hannah died. And I believe she just got probation or maybe a short term in jail and then probation for that. That's already served and done. They did, of course, seek the death penalty for all 4 of the main Wagners. Mike DeWine, who is now the governor, who was then the attorney general, said that he believed that the family had bought ammunition, a magazine clip, brass catchers, and a bug detector to prepare for the crimes. The family also studied counter surveillance devices on the properties, including pets, tampered with phones, cameras, and part of a home security system. The family also allegedly constructed a homemade silencer that was used in the shootings. So in June 2019 is when they dismissed the charges against Frederica Wagner. Apparently she had bought bulletproof vests on eBay or Amazon, and that's what they were charging her for. And then she said that she bought them on eBay and produced receipts for where it was after the Rhodens had already died. So go to part 3, 4, I don't know what part we're on, and we'll finish it up. So another major thing and a major part of this that is definitely going to come up because he's going to have to testify was in March 2021, our then Sheriff Charlie Reeder was arrested. Actually, I believe he was arrested in 2020, but he pled guilty to 2 counts of felony theft in office. He stole property or services between $1,000 and $7,500. 2 felony counts of tampering with evidence. The evidence included bags of cash and amounts of $7,000 and $621. And 1 misdemeanor count of conflict of interest using his office to secure a 2013 Nissan Versa. So the money that he allegedly and pled to stealing was money that was seized from drug raids in the county. And the car was allegedly seized in one as well, and he gave it to his daughter to drive. He's obviously forever disqualified from holding any public office, being sheriff again, anything like that. And I believe his peace officer was terminated as well. He is currently in prison. I believe he was sentenced to 3 years. I've got to learn something else to say other than I believe. But I'm pretty sure he was sentenced to 3 years. And he is serving that now in an Ohio penitentiary. It's super important to note that he was not charged for anything related to the murders with the Rhodens, the Wagners, any evidence tampering, anything with that. It was related to other things that was on a totally different scale of this murder. This murder actually was pretty well handled by this office, and by him realizing he was in over his head from the beginning with a small department, and he had just been appointed sheriff the previous year. He had been sheriff, I believe, less than a year. In April of 2021, like I said before, Jake Wagner, on the 5th anniversary of the crimes, pled guilty to 8 counts of aggravated murder and several other things that he admitted to but were not charged for. He received 8 life sentences plus 100 years. He will never get out of prison, and he does have to testify against his family. They removed the death penalty, and then this timeline that I'm reading right here, which is WCPO, Channel 9 out of Cincinnati, says that the death penalty was removed. However, the trial says that it is death penalty. So again, I'm still trying to figure that out. He pled guilty to a lot of things, including the murders, obstruction of justice, forgery, and unlawful sexual conduct with a minor who was Hannah Rhoden, which was 13. She was 13 when their relationship began. He was 20 years old, and that is absolutely disgusting. Also, I believe that he pressured Hannah to put his name on baby Kylie, who was the newborn that was only 4 days old at the time, put his name as her father on the birth certificate. I don't know if that actually happened or not, but apparently there was pretty good pressure to do it. Last part, promise. So in May of this year, Angela Wagner pled guilty to conspiracy. What else did she get? Tampering with evidence. I'm sorry, this was in 2021. Tampering with evidence, some other things. And they agreed to drop the 8 charges of murder against her, mostly because she was not physically present. She was, of course, instrumental in planning this, as we discussed before, and has been established. The Wagners did everything as a group and everything as a family vote, which, again, super fucking creepy and super weird. I love my family, but I am not murdering anybody for these people. They are on their own. I assume that the night of the murders, because Sophia, the child that all of this started over, Sophia was with Jake and had been with Jake because Hannah Mae Rhoden had just delivered baby Kylie a few days prior and had only been home from the hospital, I believe, for 2 days. So baby Sophia, who was not quite 3, was with Jake. So I assume that Angela was home with baby Sophia and George the Fourth, who was on trial this week. George the Fourth's child, who I believe his name is like Bullvine. What kind of name is that? But anyway, his name is like Bullvine. And she would have been home with the children and orchestrating it from afar on Peterson Road. They have since come out and the prosecution's laid out their case. Now that George the Fourth is going up for trial. Now, George the Third, the father, who is Billy Wagner, he has not had a trial date set, and he has not pled to anything. So I assume he's waiting to see how this trial goes, and if his son is found guilty when he was, arguably the least involved, if involved at all, then the one that they're all blaming this on is for sure going to go to prison or get the death penalty if that's the case. So I'd say he's probably waiting to see how this works out. Seems kind of like a shitty family dynamic, if you ask me, that they're all willing to just let this one fry to see if they should plead or not, but whatever. So they did argue for this trial to be moved to another county, saying that it was too small. They would not be able to get an unbiased jury in a fair trial. That was not granted, so they are doing this at the Pike County Courthouse in Waverly, Ohio. They seated a jury of 9 women and 3 men and 6 alternates. One more random thing to point out. At the beginning, there were a few different theories of who had done this. The Wagners' name didn't come up for a couple of years, other than it just rumors. But originally, there was a lot of thought put into that this could be a drug hit and a drug cartel over this marijuana grow operation. And there are some people that still believe that. There is no audio or video of a lot of the people testifying this week, so I don't know what we're going to have tonight. So we'll just have to wait and see.